Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. I'm Dr. Asma Sadiq from Anatomy Department, and today I'm going to start with you the new chapter of the embryology, and that is the development of gastrointestinal system. Okay, students, now first recall your previous knowledge from first year MBBS, in which you have studied the general anatomy, and I hope you have seen this picture many times. And if you see all the progression of the growth in the embryonic time period in each of this picture, then you will going to understand one fact, that this is showing you the folding process. And you have seen that this folding is in two-way manner. One is cephalocaudal folding, in which the head fold and the tail fold, which you can see here, that is progressing the head and a tail fold. And here you can appreciate very clearly, this is showing you the folding of the head and a tail folding, and this head and tail folding is representing the cephalocaudal folding. Also, along with that folding, there was a lateral folding, which is the lateral folding helping to meet in midline the ventral body wall. So here you appreciate that this is the fetal embryonic pole. This is showing you the development of the central nervous system from the ectoderm, represented here with this blue color. And dorsal to this whole cavity, that is the amniotic cavity, and ventral to this developing brain and CNS, this is the yolk sac, that is the secondary yolk sac. Here cranially you can see this is a cardiogenic area. Here the primitive heart tube that is developing, and this is the caudal aspect where you can see the connecting stalk along with that diverticulum of the endodermal lined yolk sac known as the allantois. Then when there is a folding, that is a cephalocaudal folding, that is approaching these two areas more closer to each other. And in that activity, when there is a cephalocaudal folding, this is incorporating into the endodermal lined yolk sac. So here you can see, because of this folding, first of all, there is the relocation of the cardiac area, that is the pericardial cavity along with the heart tube, that this is relocating towards the ventral side of the embryo, and more towards in the midline. Here you can see. So along with that, this is enclosing and incorporating into the endodermal lined tube, and this endodermal lined tube, which is due to the incorporation of the yolk sac during the cephalocaudal folding, this is a gut tube. So you can see that here this is incorporating the gut tube, where there is the ventral and dorsal aspect of or you can say the cranial or caudal aspect of this tube. They are going to have the blind ended tubes. These are the blind ended areas, which are the foregut cranially, and caudally this is the hindgut. So these are ending into a blind ended portion, and only the midgut, that midgut portion is having the connection with the yolk sac, which is approaching and narrowing down because of the progressive cephalocaudal folding in the further weeks, when there are progression of the week of gestation. So it is also going to narrow down this connection between midgut and yolk sac, and here we label it that this is a vitelo-intestinal or vitelline duct, which is just making a connection between a midgut and the yolk sac. But rest the other parts, that is the foregut and the hindgut, they are going to form the. So now again you can see that here this is whole the endodermal lined yolk sac, which is lined with yellow in color, and more ventrally you can see this cardiac primordium. This is the area of the developing heart. So when there is a developing endoderm, you can appreciate initially it opens to the yolk sac, and the ventrally you can appreciate the cardiac region. So what is going to happen in the 4th week of the development? Then at that time, during the 4th week of the development, there is craniocaudal folding, and because of this craniocaudal folding of the embryo, which is at the both ends of the embryo, along with the lateral folding at the sides of the embryo, it brings that endodermal lined yolk sac to incorporate inside into the embryo, and that's how it is helping in the formation of gut tube. So that process that brings which brings the endodermal lined yolk sac inside into the gut tube, that is starting at 4th week of the development, when there is the initiation of the cephalocaudal and. So now at the 4th week, when there is a cephalocaudal folding, there is incorporation, and it is going to bring that endodermal lined yolk sac to incorporate into that tube-like manner, and this is making this ventrally the blind-ended foregut and dorsally the blind-ended hindgut. And when it is progressing, it is also going to increasing the length of these gut tubes, and the connection here, which is now between the midgut and the yolk sac, that is also going to narrow down. And here you can see this is the cardiogenic area, and there is only the 2 connections which are now present between this gut, and these 2 connections are going to remain outside the embryo. Number 1 is the connection of this midgut with the yolk sac. So that yolk sac, it also remain outside the embryo, and the other one is this sausage like diverticulum of endoderm tissue, that is allantois. So this connection, that is through the allantois, and this allantois is also outside the embryo. So these 2 connections, which are with the endoderm lined primitive gut cavity, these connections are also the endodermal lined, but they remain outside the embryo. Now here you can see that all this is responsible by the cephalocaudal folding. So the 2 areas you must now keep in mind, that ventrally there is a connection which is a direct connection between the endoderm and ectoderm, and you can see here that there is no intervening or intermediate mesodermal tissue. So this is one ventrally, that is a portion, ventral portion of the which is the starting point, you can say, of the gut tube, that is known as oropharyngeal membrane. So this oropharyngeal membrane is lined by the ectoderm and endoderm without any intervening mesodermal tissue. So you can easily say that this is a juxtaposition of ectoderm and endoderm. So there are 2 areas during the development of gut which are known as the juxtaposition, which is a junction of only the ectoderm and endoderm. These are number 1, the oropharyngeal membrane, also known as the buccopharyngeal membrane, and here is the development of future mouth area. And caudal side, here you can see again one membrane where there is only the ectoderm and this endoderm without any mesodermal tissue. This is the cloacal membrane. So this cloacal membrane is also the one juxtaposition of ectoderm and endoderm where is there is future anus is going to develop. So here the oropharyngeal membrane and the cloacal membrane, these are closing the ventral and caudal aspects of the gut tube, and these membranes are lined by ectoderm and the endodermal tissue. So these two areas in the gut tube, you must remember, they are very important, that these are the juxtaposition. So now here you can see that the gut associated organs begin to form as there is the origination of the buds or diverticulum which are arising from the gut tube, and these diverticulum or the buds, these are helping in the formation of not only the gut but also some other gut associated organs. These gut associated organ, as here initially you can see this bulge which is the thyroid diverticulum, and from here the thyroid gland is developing. Then a bit dorsally there is the development of the respiratory diverticulum for the development of the lung tissue, and then hepatic diverticulum for the liver and pancreas development. So by the end of the first month and by the end of the fourth week, you can say, again here one bulge which you can appreciate, that is this fusiform dilatation. So this fusiform dilatation, it is visible, that is indicating that this is the area of the stomach. So this fusiform bulge, that is the area of the development of the stomach. So here you can see all that diverticulums which we have discussed. These are the buds arising from the ventral wall of the foregut for the thyroid development. This is the thyroid diverticulum, and then is this respiratory diverticulum which is also known as the lung bud, and you have seen it in the previous lectures for the development of respiratory system. And then this diverticulum which is responsible for the liver, hepatic diverticulum, and the pancreatic buds. So these all, now you can see, these are endodermal lined diverticulum or buds. So that means all the structures which are going to arise and develop from these diverticulums which are endodermal lined, definitely these are the structures which are having endodermal in origin. So most of their parenchymal tissue, the parenchyma, which includes the glands, the epithelium, and all the functional units in these gut and its gut associated structures, these are derived from the endoderm. And this one here again, now you can see what is going to happen in the lateral folding. You have seen the cephalocaudal folding in the previous slides. So this is now very helpful to understand you the lateral folding. So in the lateral folding, when there is the lateral body walls, they come to grow ventrally and then they meet in the midline, and when they meet and unite and fused in the midline, then they are enclosing the ventral body wall. So in the ventral body wall here you can see when this is going to complete, that is enclosing inside into all the gut tube, and this is making the ventral body wall which is lined by the this parietal layer and ectodermal layer. Here you can see, as you have seen in the development of the body cavities, the lateral plate mesoderm, it splits into the parietal layer of the lateral plate mesoderm and the splanchnic or the visceral mesoderm. So this is the part of the intraembryonic mesoderm. So this one, which is the parietal layer of the lateral plate mesoderm, progressing and approaching in the midline, so they are helping in the formation of ventral body wall, and inside they are enclosing here along that gut tube, this whole cavity, that is now the peritoneal cavity. So this is enclosing inside the peritoneal cavity. And all that mesodermal tissue which is associated and lined along the gut tube or yolk sac, this is the splanchnic layer of the mesoderm. So as I have told you that the parenchymal tissue and all the epithelium that is derived from the endoderm, and the musculature, all the stroma and the muscular component in the gut wall, this is derived from the splanchnic layer of the this lateral plate mesoderm, which is also known as visceral mesoderm. So keep in mind that this visceral mesoderm is also going to help in formation of the musculature and the stroma, along with the parenchymal tissue which is derived from that endoderm of the gut. So now we are going to divide that gut, as you have seen that this is divided into three parts: the foregut, midgut and the hindgut. So the foregut is the portion which is now starting from the respiratory diverticulum to the portion of the hepatic diverticulum. So from the respiratory diverticulum and hepatic diverticulum, the structures which are derived from the foregut are the pharynx, the part of the pharynx, esophagus, stomach and the proximal part of the duodenum till the opening of bile duct. So you will see that in the gross lecture that bile duct is going to open in the second part of the duodenum. So till that opening of bile duct, you say that this is the foregut area. Also this pharynx, that is basically derived from the pharyngeal arches, which you will study in the development of head and neck. So most of the part of the pharynx, this is developed by the pharyngeal arches, and so distal to the portion of the pharynx which is from the respiratory diverticulum till the hepatic diverticulum embryologically, or you can say that there is the opening of the bile duct, is indicating the area of foregut. So not only this gut structure, it is also giving you that gut associated structures, like you have seen the thyroid diverticulum. So this is giving you the thyroid and the parathyroid gland. You will see the tympanic cavity is also endodermal lined cavity derived from the foregut area. From the respiratory diverticulum, trachea, bronchi and the lungs, these are getting their all the parenchymal tissue derived from the endoderm of the gut tube, and the liver, gallbladder, pancreas developing from the hepatic and pancreatic buds, these are also derived from the ventral wall of the foregut. So they are all the derivatives of foregut. Now the distal part of the duodenum, which is from the distal to the opening of bile duct to the junction of right 2/3 and the left 1/3. So till the right 2/3 of the transverse colon, we label this is the part of midgut. So all the structures which are in between, like you have seen the distal to the opening of bile duct, the duodenum, the jejunum ileum, and ascending colon till the transverse colon, its right 2/3, are the derivative of the midgut. Then the left 1/3 of the transverse colon, then descending colon, sigmoid colon, rectum and till anus, all these components are the hindgut components. So the hindgut derivatives are the left 1/3 of the transverse colon till the anus. And also from the cloaca, there will be the partition of the cloaca into the ventral and its dorsal part, and then this cloaca is the part of endodermal lined gut tube. That's why when there is a partition that is developing into the urinary bladder from its ventral half, and the dorsal part is dividing going to form embryologically the rectum and anal canal. So the urinary bladder, it's all the endodermal tissue, it's that epithelium or mucosa of the urinary bladder. This is derived from the gut tube. So this is also the endodermal in origin. So again you have seen that the musculature and the other stromal component are mesodermal in origin, but the epithelial component of the urinary bladder is also derived from the endoderm of the gut. So these are endodermal in origin. You must remember and keep in mind. Now the development of the arteries, as you have seen that this whole portion here, that is the pharynx, that is the pharyngeal primordium, this is developing by the pharyngeal arches. And distal to this where is the respiratory diverticulum that is forming the esophagus, and then this dilatation for stomach till the opening of that hepatic diverticulum, where you can say now this is making the opening of bile duct. This whole portion is the foregut. So the aorta, which is lying dorsally, that is giving branches which are passing through the mesentery of the this gut tube. So you can see here that dorsally, from the distal aspect of the esophagus, stomach, duodenum, small and large intestine, all of it that is going to attach to the dorsal body wall through this dorsal mesentery. So in the region of the stomach, we label this dorsal mesentery the dorsal mesogastrium. Then for the duodenum, this is dorsal mesoduodenum. For the small intestine, this is mesentery proper. And for the large intestine, this is dorsal mesocolon. And you know what is the mesentery by definition now? I hope you have studied the peritoneum in a very detailed manner in gross anatomy. You have studied the peritoneum. That is the double fold of the peritoneum that is making the mesentery, and it is enclosing and wrapping the gut tube. So only dorsally here you can see it extends from the distal aspect of the duodenum till the hind gut. This is suspended through the dorsal body wall through the dorsal mesentery. It persists. But later on you will see what is going to happen to this dorsal mesentery also. So this mesentery is actually allowing the passage of the blood vessels and the nerves from the aorta to the gut tube. So here you can see that this aorta is giving the branch to the foregut, that is the celiac artery. So celiac artery supplies all the structures derived from the foregut. So this foregut is making all that structures you have seen in the previous slide. They all are going to supplied by the branches of the celiac artery. So you can say the celiac artery is the artery of foregut. Then the artery of the midgut in the same way is the superior mesenteric artery, which supply all the structure which are derived from the midgut. And then all the components of the hindgut are supplied by the inferior mesenteric artery. So these arteries, they are typically the arteries for the foregut, midgut and hindgut. You must remember them. Now here you can see, if we are talking about the mesentery, so also about the ventral mesentery, you can see which is only going to persist in the area of the lower part of the esophagus, stomach and the proximal part of duodenum. This is the ventral mesentery. This is derived from the septum transversum, and later when there is a formation of the you can say that is the hepatic diverticulum and the liver tissue and the hepatocyte which is developing. So with the development of this liver, this ventral mesentery is divided into two parts. One ventral component which is attaching the ventral part of the liver to the anterior abdominal wall. This is the falciform ligament, and its dorsal part that is between the lesser curvature of stomach to the liver, this is lesser omentum. So actually the ventral mesentery, which only persists in the area of lower part of esophagus to the proximal portion of the duodenum, that is going to derived from the septum transversum, and these are having the components lesser omentum and the falciform ligament of the liver. So you can easily understand it now with the development of that liver. They are divided into the ventral falciform ligament and dorsal lesser omentum. So you must remember what is ventral mesentery, that is lesser omentum and falciform ligament. And embryologically they are derived from septum transversum. This is very important MCQ question, you must remember this. Now starting with the development of esophagus, and I hope with the development of respiratory system, with the development of trachea, now this is the same manner. You can also understand it here that from the ventral wall of the primitive foregut area, there is the origin of that lung bud or the respiratory diverticulum, which has to develop into the respiratory system, and this is lying ventrally. And dorsally this tube, that is the foregut tube, and this is going to separate it from each other with the development of tracheoesophageal septum, that fold from each side, or a septum which is making a curtain between these two tubes. And that's how when this is going to fuse in the midline, and they are giving the ventral tube, that is the trachea, and the dorsal tube, which is the esophagus. So there is the esophageotracheal or tracheoesophageal folds which are going to arise, and then they grow and meet in the midline, making tracheoesophageal septum and dividing the tube into ventral trachea, respiratory tube, and dorsal gut tube. Then at the 5th week of the development, it is progressing into the proliferation of the esophageal gut tube. So internally there is a rapid proliferation of the endodermal tissue, which is going to enclose, or which is going to obliterate the lumen of the gut tube in the esophagus. So at the 8th week, this endodermal proliferation that is completed, and then there is the process of recanalization. And this recanalization is by the you can say there is a cell death, and by this cell death there is again the formation of the cavity. So first of all there is a tube, then from the 5th weeks onward there is the rapid proliferation of the endodermal epithelial cells, which are obliterating the lumen of the esophagus, and at the 8th week onwards there is recanalization process, and by this recanalization again there is a development of the lumen of the gut tube. So it is restored by the recanalization process. So here the anomalies of the gut tube. So these can be definitely if there is recanalization failure, or there is a problem in the deviation of the septum. So first of all, if there is a recanalization failure, so what it is going to form, this is leading into the esophageal atresia. So if it is a complete recanalization failure, that is known as esophageal atresia, and partial recanalization failure is going to give rise the esophageal stenosis. So this stenosis and esophageal atresia, these are because of the recanalization failure. Number 2, if there is the abnormal and more deviation of the tracheoesophageal septum towards the posterior direction, more towards, if it is more towards that posteriorly developing gut tube. So if there is a deviation of that septum, this is also leading to the atresia of the esophagus, as well as there is the very common abnormality, these are tracheoesophageal fistulas. So the tracheoesophageal fistulas, which are because of the deviation in the tracheoesophageal septum. So what are different types of tracheoesophageal fistulas? You have seen in the respiratory development as well. Here you can see number one, the more common one, that is the A, where there is the proximal end of the esophagus, it ends into a blind sac, and the distal end of esophagus is connected and communicating to the trachea at its bifurcation, where trachea is dividing into the bronchi. So this is making this tracheoesophageal fistula. So in this case again there is a blind ended proximal portion. Also in the esophageal atresia, when the baby is or the fetus is unable to swallow the amniotic fluid, so this is leading into the increased volume of amniotic fluid known as polyhydramnios. So the atresia, stenosis, and this sort of tracheoesophageal fistula with proximal blind ended esophagus, that is associated with polyhydramnios. So again here without no fistula, but the esophagus is showing the proximal and distal blind ended. This is H-shaped communication. Both proximal distal ends, they are going to communicate with the trachea. Now here, if only one upper portion, the proximal esophagus has the communication, but the distal end is going to ended into blind ended esophagus. Here this is again H-shape, but here the distal and the proximal portion of the esophagus, they are going to open up at separate level. In this communication, they are going to communicate jointly. Both of the proximal and distal tubes, these are communicating together. But here the proximal tube is going to communicate separately as compared to this distal tube is also communicating separately. So these are different types and varieties of the tracheoesophageal fistulas. So now the development of the stomach, which is the part of the foregut, and this is making the caudal part of the foregut tube. So initially at the 4th week of the development, in this tubular structure of the gut, there is appearance of a dilatation or a bulge, which is indicating the area of primordium of the stomach. So initially there is the fusiform dilatation or that bulge, which is known as the primordium of the stomach, and here it has the ventral surface and the dorsal surface. So this dorsal surface, it grows faster as compared to the ventral surface, and it shows the rotation along the longitudinal axis, that is 90-degree clockwise rotation. So by this 90-degree clockwise rotation, that initial ventral surface, which is moving at a slower rate, we label it is a lesser curvature of the stomach that moves to the right side of the abdominal cavity. And the one which is the dorsal surface growing faster, we label this is the greater curvature that moves to the left. So the lesser curvature is towards the right, and dorsally that surface moving to the left because of this 90-degree clockwise rotation along the longitudinal axis. Now one more thing, that the original left side of the body, now it becomes the ventral surface. So this left one portion moves towards the ventral surface, and the original right side, it becomes the dorsal surface. And so that's why as you know, this is supplied by the vagus nerve. So the left vagus nerve, along with its surface, as it is moving towards the ventral side, so this is becoming the anterior vagal trunk, and the right vagus nerve, it becomes the posterior vagal trunk as it moves along with its surface dorsally. Now there is another rotation which is along the anterior posterior axis, and because of this final rotation along the anterior-posterior axis, then this is helping to accommodate the stomach normally as it is in the abdominal cavity. So this rotation at anterior posterior axis, it moves the cardiac end or the upper end of the stomach downwards and more towards the left, and this pylorus that moves upward and towards the right. So relocating the pylorus towards the right side and more in upward direction. You have seen here the rotation number 1, which is along the 90-degree clockwise rotation along longitudinal axis. This is the longitudinal axis, and when this is rotating it, as you can see here, this is rotating it 90-degree. So this dorsal surface moves towards the left and ventral one that is moving towards the right, and this is the lesser curvature and this one is the greater curvature. And again here, if you see, if I say this is the left side, this one this is the left side, this by this movement is coming anteriorly and right side is moving posteriorly. So here this is showing you the first rotation in this slide. Then is the formation of curvature. As I have told you that the this dorsal surface that is going to move more faster and it grows at a rapid growth rate as compared to the ventral side. So here there is a formation of lesser and greater curvature. There is a second rotation which is along the anterior posterior axis, and this is going to shift the pylorus to the right and in a bit upward direction, and cardiac end of the stomach more towards the left and in a downward direction. Then the axis of the rotations, these are, number 1 is the longitudinal axis and the second rotation is along the anterior posterior axis. So this slide is showing you the rotation axis on which the stomach is rotated and then acquired its normal position. So by this rotation, when this stomach is going to rotate, then you have seen that the stomach posteriorly along its dorsal side is going to attach with the dorsal body wall through dorsal mesogastrium. So by this, when there is a rotation, there is number 1 is the development of the cavity. These small vacuoles are developing and they are making a cavity, and also when there is a rotation, this is going to pull the dorsal mesogastrium along with it. So this is the dorsal surface. So I have told you that this dorsal surface is the same, which is growing faster and becoming greater curvature. And this greater curvature during the rotation, they are moving more towards the left side. So when this is moving towards the left side, it is pulling that dorsal mesogastrium along with it, as it is attached in the midline to the dorsal body wall. So attachment is there, but it is pulling it more towards the left side and enclosing in it this one space, that is the lesser sac or omental bursa. So how the omental bursa is formed? Because of the rotation, the greater curvature or the dorsal surface of stomach is pulling the dorsal mesogastrium along with it and enclosing that space. So also you can see here that is also showing you how that lesser sac or omental bursa is formed. So this dorsal mesogastrium, there is a rotation, and by this pull it is enclosing in it that space which is omental bursa or the lesser sac. So this pull, that is also pulling the dorsal mesogastrium towards the left side. So this dorsal mesogastrium, which is now towards the left side, here is also the mesodermal proliferation, that is the formation of the spleen. So the splenic tissue is going to form in that dorsal mesogastrium, And now this one, which is the attachment of the this component of the dorsal mesogastrium, where spleen is developing, and attached to the stomach is the gastrosplenic ligament. And the one now which is moving dorsally and attached to the kidneys and the dorsal wall, that is lino-renal ligament or splenorenal ligament. So these two ligaments, they are also formed by the pull of that dorsal mesogastrium during rotation of the stomach. Along with there is the development of spleen, which is by the mesodermal proliferation. So this is again a cut section showing you the rotation, and then as it is enveloped by this mesogastrium, and again you can see when there is a pull, because of this pull, this is going to enclose in it this lesser sac. And you have seen in the gross anatomy that this lesser sac or omental bursa, that is communicated to the greater sac through the epiploic foramen, yes, or foramen of Winslow. So now this one is the space you have seen, and this is behind the stomach, and this whole space, that is the lesser sac. And here it's this lesser sac, if you see embryologically, when there is the development of you can say diaphragm. So by the development of diaphragm, one of its part that is present deep to the base of the medial surface of right lung, we label it infracardiac bursa. And here no, you can see it is inferior portion is going to have superior recess and this inferior recess of omental bursa. But this inferior recess, that is going to obliterate very soon when all these two layers or internal two layers of the greater omentum, they are going to fuse together. So actually here in between the two layers of the greater omentum is the inferior recess of the lesser omentum, which is obliterated when there is fusion of greater omentum. And now this is only the superior recess of the lesser sac or omental bursa, now which is communicating to the greater sac through epiploic foramen. Now again, to review the mesenteries of the gut tube, and especially we will focus on the mesenteries of the stomach. So here in the mesentery, you can see that the stomach and also the liver, that is suspended in the mesentery, which is attached to the dorsal wall as well as to the ventral body wall. So this wall, dorsal wall mesentery here, that is the dorsal mesogastrium, and that is later on going to become the greater omentum of the stomach. And ventrally there is this ventral mesentery, which is becoming the lesser omentum of the stomach. So you keep in mind that the origin of the ventral mesentery, that is from the septum transversum. And also the ventral mesentery of the liver, it is going to become the falciform ligament. So actually this ventral mesentery, because of the development of liver in the septum transversum, divided it into the ventral component, the falciform ligament, and the dorsal one, which is the lesser omentum, attaching the liver to the lesser curvature of the stomach. And also you have seen all the mesenteries which is going to attach, known as the mesentery proper for the small intestine, mesoduodenum for the duodenum, and for the colon this is the mesocolon. So dorsal mesentery, that persists throughout the length of the gut tube, but the ventral mesentery only present from the dorsal distal end of the esophagus, stomach, and to proximal part of or first part of duodenum. And here that is showing you the areas where the mesentery is going to disappear or regress. Here you can say this is fused to the posterior abdominal wall. So in the region of the duodenum, that mesoduodenum fused with the posterior abdominal wall Also ascending and descending colon. Here the mesentery is fused with the posterior abdominal wall, and all these structures, they are going to become plastic. So the congenital anomalies associated with the stomach, they are very rare, except this congenital hypertrophic pyloric stenosis. In this case, the muscles present in the pylorus, in the wall of the pyloric region of the stomach, they become hypertrophied. That means there is over and hyperproliferation of the muscles in the pyloric region. So there is the hypertrophy and overproliferation in the pyloric sphincter. So this can be palpated as a spherical nodule. If this is a thin newborn baby, then it can be palpated as a very thick spherical nodule. And also, as this is leading to the obstruction of the lumen, so due to this obstruction, that is characterized by the vomiting, and the vomiting is forceful, and such forceful vomiting in the pyloric stenosis is known as projectile vomiting. And the vomiting is non-bilious, definitely, as the bile is going to enter into the duodenum at the opening of bile duct, which is in the second part of the duodenum, and this obstruction is at the pyloric region. So this is leading to the non-bilious vomiting. Bile is not mixed with the food contents present in the stomach. So these are the typical features of the pyloric stenosis, which are the projectile vomiting and non-bilious vomiting. And it is going to affect more commonly in males than in the females. So this is going to be the congenital hypertrophic pyloric stenosis. So this is leading into the distended abdomen because of the obstruction, and also the peristalsis can be visible over the abdomen. So this can be corrected by the surgeries, and the surgical relief of the pyloric obstruction is by the pyloromyotomy, by giving the incision on the pylorus, releasing that obstruction, and this process and this treatment surgically is known as pyloromyotomy, releasing and cutting the muscles in the pyloric region. So that is all about here the development and its congenital anomalies of the. So by this I end up my lecture here, and we'll continue in the next lecture with the rest of the development of gastrointestinal system. If you have any question, feel free to contact me and ask me the question, and send me the assignment on my email. Thank you very much.